below for everything that we're going to be talking about on today's show. And let me make sure I got everything set up for the screen share for all your socials. And then we'll get into your book because that's going to lead us into the conversation today. So going to have links down below for Aaron's X account, which you can find at Aaron R Day, because there is an Aaron Day and it's not this Aaron Day. This Aaron Day is Aaron R Day. And I'm also going to have a link down below for his website, daylightfreedom.org, his Rumble channel, which he's live streaming on currently, his YouTube channel. And here we are at the book, The Final Countdown, Crypto, Gold, Silver, and the People's Last Stand Against Tyranny by Central Bank Digital Currencies. So to revisit this, when did you write this book and why did you decide to write this book?
Well, I started writing this book early last year. And it was prompted by a number of things. So I had been a political activist for quite some time. I exited politics and moved entirely into using blockchain technology to get rid of third parties in other areas besides money, right? So money is one kind of asset. There are a whole bunch of other categories like the stock market and any other market you can imagine. And so I started spending some time on that. And then COVID happened. And then all of a sudden I found that friends of mine in the Liberty community were being targeted by the federal government who were involved in crypto. So Jeremy Kauffman, the CEO of Library, Ian Freeman. And I wanted to understand why, because these were people that were not doing anything that was, illegal, certainly nothing immoral. These are people that promoted peace and voluntary exchange. And so as I started digging into the research, I found that the whole point of this crypto crackdown is to cut off any competition to central bank digital currencies, because crypto is seen as a threat. Certain cryptos are seen in particular as a threat to central bank digital currencies. And so as I researched this, I found that in 2020, there were 35 countries just researching CBDCs, and that number has ballooned to 134 countries, representing 98% of the GDP. So as I dug into what's going on here, I realized I've got to alert people to this, and because this is the single biggest threat to human liberty. Once they can truly program and censor and monitor all financial transactions, it's essentially the end of free will. So that's what prompted me to write the book and even run for president, for the purpose not to win, but to elevate the issue publicly.
That was what I was going to ask you next. But before I got into that, when you're talking about the research that you're doing in countries that have developed and that are testing out and piloting CBDCs, are you getting that from the Atlantic Council website, or are you using multiple resources?
I've used multiple resources. The Atlantic Council website is one good resource. There's a new resource that's been developed by one of the guys from Cato. So, I mean, I look at a variety of different sources. I use as the starting point Atlantic Council, because when I started this journey, that was the best resource out there. Others have kind of emerged. And it is a great starting point to then drill into the specifics and to try to understand, okay, what are the technologies involved, who's involved, what stage. So far I found it's the most comprehensive. Although to be clear, the group behind it is kind of pro CBDC. So I think that which actually is useful, because it gives you a glimpse into how they're looking at these things.
I didn't take it as being pro CBDC. I thought it was very, very neutral, but I guess the company behind it could have other intentions, but it is a good resource. I was just curious if that's where you had gotten it from. Shout out to John Germain. I guess he sees the mushrooms on my shirt and he's getting a little peanut butter and jelly over there. But yeah, it is a great website. And I'm glad that you mentioned that you ran for president, because that's where I wanted to take the conversation next, was before we get into your newest article, the fact that you have been involved in politics, you've ran for president with the intention of trying to educate people, which we'll get into. And then I guess you've had, if I understood it correctly, your mother or family members that have also been involved in politics as well. So do you mind kind of describing a little bit about your background when it comes to that, and then your run for president?
Yeah, so my background with this is, I started out libertarian. So, I mean, I started an Ayn Rand objectivist club in high school. I went to my first libertarian party meeting in North Carolina when I was at Duke in 1995. So I've always been a libertarian. Family was not libertarian. Family's more on the Republican side. My stepmother was involved in politics. Started out at a very low level in Broward County, Florida, in the Republican Party, kind of a precinct captain. And then she worked her way up to co-chair of the RNC nationally and was actually Trump's ambassador to Costa Rica. So we haven't seen eye to eye on things. In fact, I haven't talked to her for quite some time, which I'll get into that. But so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I dropped out of college, started my first company in 95, and then sold that company, then got involved in some other investing, and then started another company that was destroyed by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and Attorney General Eric Holder. We were collateral damage. I wasn't explicitly targeted, but that's what kind of turned me into a full-time activist. So I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project and got very involved in politics in New Hampshire on the Liberty side. So running super PACs, running organizations to help get candidates elected at the state level. So we got over 100 candidates elected. My wife was the chairman of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. I ran for U.S. Senate. I was involved in a whole variety of different things politically. I actually ran for U.S. Senate specifically to cost Kelly Ayotte her seat, which is a longer story, but I was opposed to and continue to be opposed to Obamacare. And it turned out Republicans were actually the ones promoting Obamacare Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire. And they were doing this to protect the U.S. Senate seat. So I said, if you're going to screw up the state with this huge federal entitlement, then I'm just going to screw up your federal races. And so I recruited a slate of candidates to run for all of these federal offices. And we actually ended up costing the Republicans all three of those seats. And then I ended up in a 5.5 years of litigation related to that. And anyway, long story short, I see no political solution to this. So I want to make sure everybody's very clear. In fact, when I exited politics in 2018, I haven't voted since 2000.
I was going to say, who are you voting for?
I mean, I'm not voting for anybody. Although I might actually make the case for voting for Trump explicitly for Ross Ulbricht to be pardoned that is the only compelling case. I don't believe any of these politicians will do any of the things that they say, but the one thing that they can do is follow through on a pardon. So that is compelling. That's the only compelling thing. But I don't want anybody to ever think that I think there's a political solution to any of the problems that we're dealing with in terms of technocracy or crypto or freedom in any way, shape, or form.
Did you say you went to Duke?
I went to Duke for a year.
Okay. I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That's in Raleigh, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. When you said North Carolina, just obviously perked my ears there a little bit. And something else I found really interesting is something about you free staters over there in New Hampshire like to run for office, because Jeremy Kauffman, he ran for Senate, I believe, as an independent and maybe libertarian.
He ran as a libertarian. I ran as an independent.
And then Bruce Fenton ran as a Republican, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I interviewed Bruce. Do you know him as well?
Yeah, I know Bruce.
Okay, sure. Cool. Yeah, he's in a good circle. Very, very interesting about you guys up there, though. I kind of wonder if, because it's, I'm not sure how certain people are being targeted, like Ian Freeman, but I don't know if it has something to do with living in New Hampshire and being part of that Free State Project. Because there's only been a handful of people that had really been arrested for these things. I think there was a guy in Arizona named Morpheus. There was a scammer.
The money transmitter thing. Yeah.
Morpheus. Yeah. Money transmitter and operating without a operating without a money transmitter license and money laundering. That's what they get everybody for. And it was whether you were selling on local Bitcoins. There's all sorts of different ways they were doing it. Some of it was undercover agents setting people up. There was a scammer that I ultimately ended up having to help get put in prison, but I was supporting him originally when he was arrested for similar charges.
Yep.
And was found guilty for operating without the money transmitter license and money laundering, just like all these other people that got arrested for it. But it seems like they're targeting certain individuals.
Well, they are targeting certain individuals. I don't know that it's necessarily related to New Hampshire, other than the fact that New Hampshire obviously has a high percentage of voluntarists and libertarians. But in the case of Ian, I think there's something more specific about this, because I also interviewed a guy named Stephen Mirioff. I don't know if you've ever talked to him. Stephen was involved early on with the legal formation of Ethereum. In fact, he's a lawyer who actually created the legal concept of the ICO, created the very first security token at Overstock, and worked
What's his
on
name?
Stephen Mirioff.
Okay.
And
like N or M as in Mary?
Nerayooff.
Okay.
So I interviewed him shortly after interviewing Roger Ver. And so this was in April, or actually early May. And he has a really fascinating story. And his story is basically that he uncovered corruption. He was offered a major chunk of Ethereum and a major chunk of consensus. And his claim is that he uncovered corruption between the SEC and Ethereum. And to shut him up, the Department of Justice manufactured a extortion case against him. He said that he had 12 FBI agents come to his house in the middle of the night. They arrested him, they threw him in a van, and they showed him 2 pages of names. And they said, unless you give us information that leads to indictments and convictions, you'll never see your kids again. And on that list, Roger Ver, Patrick Byrne, Bruce Fenton, I mean, are kind of people, the people that are at the intersection of being pro-liberty and crypto. And he didn't follow. Naomi Brockwell also, by the way, was on the list. So going after the privacy angle. So this was in 2019. So it's oftentimes that, if we're in the liberty community, we say, oh, how many watch lists are we on? But after interviewing Stephen, I'm like, okay, we literally are on a watch list. Since 2019, the DOJ has been actively going after people who have committed no crimes with no evidence. And they're using extortion against other people to leverage them for information. So this is actually going on. So that list and who Nerayooff was asked to spill the dirt on, those are all of the people that I think we would consider to be our friends or friendly to the cause of using this technology to promote freedom. And so I believe that Ian was targeted just as Roger Ver for the very simple reason. It's kind of like when you look at pandemics, right? These guys are good at doing population models and trying to figure out how to get vaccines to the most people and looking at where it's going to be the most viral. Well, if you go back and you look at, well, how did people find out about Bitcoin? Where did that virus spread? Well, Roger learned about it from Ian on Free Talk Live in 2010. And then Roger became the most prolific person evangelizing Bitcoin from 2010 until 2017. And so if you were concerned about suppressing information about how this technology could be used to get rid of governments and central banks, you would want to go to the people that are the most effective at spreading it. That's why I think Ian is in federal prison. That's why I believe that Roger is in Spain out on bail, but not able to talk about his circumstance because they needed these people to be silent as they continue to ratchet up the tyranny on CBDCs. And I do want to say one thing that I point out in this article, which has been a shift in thinking. But of course, I've been doing this for 18 months, 2 years now. And the first thing people ask me is, well, what is a CBDC? And after researching it for a couple of years, we already have a CBDC. Now, at this point, we're just talking about adding layers of tyranny and layers of surveillance, but we already effectively have a CBDC. And they're just wanting to close off the competition and make sure that they are the only game in town. And so I think this is what we're dealing with. I think this is what I think Ian and Roger are both caught up in that because they're the most effective. And it's had a chilling effect. Ian being arrested has had a chilling effect in New Hampshire. I mean, hands down. I mean, he was in Keene. He's onboarded merchants. He has been living crypto for, almost 15 years and operating ATMs. And Roger, clearly, there was I don't know if it's as much a chilling effect as it is that people didn't get to find out this information that isn't hijacking Bitcoin, which is really critical information. If, now we have all these presidential candidates and all these other people talking about strategic Bitcoin reserves and everything else. And these people are unaware that this is a hijacked asset and isn't what it purports to be. And so I think that it's not an accident that Roger's in the situation that he's in. And I think it's related to him speaking the truth about very important topics.
Well, listening to you say this, one thing that I'm thinking is that, yeah, I mean, they probably have like a list and they probably are targeting people, but and especially the liberty, freedom minded people, because a lot of the people that were like that in the very beginning were either arrested, scared away, or made enough money that they just disappeared. So it makes sense that they're targeting people that were liberty minded, freedom people. What I'm getting at is like, if you didn't dot your I's and cross your T's with all the things in your life and they could find something to arrest you, they will do that. And if you've covered your ass well enough where you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and I'll give an example, someone like Eric Voorhees, they want to go after Eric Voorhees so bad, the government does. But the way that he has conducted business and then turned Shapeshift into a DAO, he was able to avoid that. And it was actually listed in a lot of different government reports about what he had done and how that DAO had been formed, and how that DAO is actually probably one of the only real, true, successful DAOs. So Roger messed up in a sense and didn't move his companies out of the United States. Now I know there may not have been that thinking at the time, but if he was going to expatriate, it might have been smart for him to just completely dissolve any sort of relationship that he had with the United States, as opposed to expatriating and then still keeping your businesses here in the United States, which technically, per the legal system, makes you liable to their tax game, their fraudulent tax game. I'm trying to look at this from many different angles.
Yeah, I mean, is Eric safe? They'll make stuff up. It's kind of like the Steven Nerioff case. They literally manufactured an extortion case. So the problem with this is it doesn't matter whether you dot the I's or cross the T's or not. They'll literally just make things up. So, Eric might have a slight advantage now, but again, they'll pounce on him. And this is what I've found is, you can use conspiracy or doing things over state lines. There's so many ways to get people that I mean, what is it? We commit 3 felonies a day at least. It's actually impossible to comply with the law. It's impossible to even know what the laws are. It's not
technical. I don't call it the law. That's another conversation for another day, but it's the legal system. It's the statutes and codes, but that's not law. That's legal shit. And there's a difference in things being lawful and legal and unlawful and illegal. Because there are things that are lawful that are illegal, and there are things that are unlawful that are legal. So how can that be if they mean the same thing? I also want to push back, and not in a bad way, about I do love your newest article, which again, this is linked down below in the video description. I think this is. I will be adding everything after this live stream so you guys can check this out. But this is Aaron's newest article. I disagree that we already have a central bank digital currency, because I think we have more of we definitely have a digital dollar. I think we're on the precursor and getting ready for a true CBDC, but this is kind of this form of currency that they have right now is still too restrictive to be called a central bank digital currency. It's definitely a step in the direction of it, and I agree that the system is pretty much digital. What did you say the percentage of cash was in the
I mean, it's already 92% digital, but part of the reason that I make the argument that I make about it already being a CBDC is they're changing the narrative. We need to own the narrative. And what I'm trying to do is establish a framework that says we already have a central bank digital currency. It's what I call it 45 out of 200 on a tyranny index. And the different elements that they're adding to it just add to the tyranny, but it doesn't definitionally change whether it's a CBDC or not. And the politicians are using the definition game to make it look like they're out there defending us against the CBDC, when the reality is the source of money is it's the government issuing an IOU to the Federal Reserve, who creates entries in an Oracle database. That is the initial genesis of money. Now you can go and say we have commercial banks.
Well, our modern form of money, because that's not exactly how money works. That's just how we're playing the imaginary game today.
Correct. And so then, whatever, they create this database, these entries in a database, and then the government writes checks and pays vendors, and then those checks get deposited into commercial banks, and then commercial banks have their own database, Oracle databases, MS SQL databases, where they create money out of thin air, backed by the CBDC, the digital currency from the Federal Reserve. So technically, it might be that we have a commercial bank digital currency backed by a central bank digital currency as a reserve. That might be slightly more accurate. But as I started going through this exercise of tracking how this works and questioning this more, I realized, so what's the difference? So what people are concerned about with CBDCs is they're concerned about, when I ask people, well, what are you worried about if they've even heard of CBDCs? They're worried about surveillance. They're worried about their money being tracked. They're worried about having access to their funds removed. Right? These are the things that people are concerned about when they hear about the threat of CBDCs. Well, the problem is you dig into this, we already have that. Also, programmability. Programmability is the other part that people think is some off into the future, distant thing that can only happen with the CBDC. Well, as I looked at the different CBDCs that are already out there and that have been contemplated, I realized that, first of all, you can still have cash and have a CBDC at the same time. There's nothing out there. There's no definition that says you can't have a CBDC while also having cash. In fact, I would argue cash is just a paper token representing a database entry in a digital system. And furthermore, and I didn't put this in the article, but there's a lot of developments going on how you can track cash. There's a lot of things going on with RFID, nanotechnology, serial numbers, and everything else. And so for people who think that, oh, I'm using cash, this is great, I'm bucking the system, understand that it's just a paper representation of fiat, and they're going to add tracking to that. They've been slowly adding tracking to that. So anyway, you can have cash and a CBDC. Now, the issue is, okay, a lot of people think that a CBDC means you don't have an account with the bank. You only have an account with the central bank, and that essentially banks go away. This is a big misconception that people have. None of the implementations work like that, including China. All of the systems proposed have a two-tiered structure where you have a central bank issuing a digital currency to commercial banks. So commercial banks do not go away. So if people think that for something to be a CBDC, it means that you have to have an account directly with the central bank, that's not how any of the actual implementations work.
I do think that I agree with you in a lot of ways on what you said with the banking system, but I feel like there's a consolidation as well to kind of get down to the few. They don't want to have as many commercial banks that we currently have now, and I'm pretty sure you can agree that we've already seen some banks crash, and we know that there's more banking problems on the way.
Sure. And at the end of the day, so my whole point behind this is it's already much worse than everybody thinks. And from the conception of what people are concerned about with CBDCs, we already have what people think and fear about a CBDC. It only gets worse from here. Is there consolidation? Yes. Does the consolidation morph more to the big four, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Chase? Those are the four largest banks. Yes. Does everything move towards that? Yes. Are those banks and the largest banks the primary owners of the Federal Reserve? Well, we don't know for sure, but it makes sense. And if you look at the founding of the Federal Reserve itself and who the successor organizations are, yeah, those four banks are largely creature from Jekyll Island. Exactly. But my point is these are all distinctions without a difference, because we already have this surveillance, and I want to alert people to what the surveillance is, because I actually posted something yesterday. Nick Fuentes, somebody sent me a clip from a couple of days ago. So Nick actually speaks a little bit about Bitcoin, BTC as well. Nick had his Bitcoin seized by the federal government. Using chain analysis, they determined that he received something like 13 Bitcoin in one transaction, and then $3,000 for the Bitcoin in another from a donor. And the donor ended up killing himself. And Nick didn't even know this. Nick didn't even know who the donor was. Well, anyway, they seized his Bitcoin. He didn't know any of this. None of it was illegal, and they didn't give any of it back.
Where was the Bitcoin, though?
I don't know for sure where the Bitcoin was. I mean, I suspect it was.
I'm pretty sure it's not in a self-custodial wallet that he possesses and controls the private key to. Because if it was, they wouldn't be able to seize it unless they arrested him and he willingly gave them that information.
Yeah, so in his particular case, it was probably that. Although in the case of Ross Ulbricht and Ian and everybody else, I mean, I've yet to see the person that, you know, when they do a sting operation for several years and they confiscate all of your hardware wallets, I haven't seen anybody, you know, actually not give up the keys. This is why the federal government has a 200,000 Bitcoin, what Trump wants to turn into a strategic reserve. They didn't buy it or mine it. They actually stole it through civil asset forfeiture. So while it's true that you can memorize your key and memorize all of this information, it's also true that most you through chain analysis, they can track who has what. Yeah. And yes, you can do all of these, you know, gymnastics and work your way around it, but most people honestly haven't. And this is why governments have the Bitcoin that they do, is through confiscation and the ability to do tracking. Anyway,
I definitely want to identify who we are, and I agree that, you know, it's you know, as you talked about, people thought Bitcoin was anonymous, but it's not. It's pseudo anonymous, and it's easy to be able to figure out who you are with the technologies that we have today. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not completely disagreeing with you. The one thing I want to make sure that we're in agreement with, that regardless, because you have politicians saying, I vow no CBDC in the United States. You have that kind of verbiage going on. So whether it's a digital dollar, a digital yuan, a stable coin, USDC, USDT, PayPal stable coin, whether it's a central bank digital currency, it technically is all the same thing. So we need to make sure that we're understanding all the different words they try to want to use to call it something different than what it is, so people don't think of it as this surveillance 1984 device, because we don't have a uniledger. They can't automatically take out your taxes or fines or anything like that without going through proper legislation. So when I think we have a true, actual programmable currency, whether they call it a CBDC, digital dollar, whatever, it's going to get rid of all that friction. And part of that friction, even looking at other countries, what happened in Canada, in order for the Canadian government to do what they did against that the Freedom Convoy of truckers, they had to go through legislation. Now, if it was in a different route and it was already programmed in, then they could actually do something without going through that legislation and having to go through court systems in the United States or whatever it is to have your bank account frozen and funds sent. So we're close. I agree. I just think we need to educate everybody about all the sides of this monster that they're building.
Well, so my point is, I think we're actually already there. And in fact, so it is, so strictly speaking, we have a central bank digital currency. There exists a central bank digital currency. That is what the federal government pays its bills using.
But a lot of our money creation is from commercial banks, which aren't technically central banks. So it's not 100%.
It's not 100%, but okay, who owns the Federal Reserve? I mean, like, we're literally sitting here saying the people that own the Federal Reserve create digital currency, and the Federal Reserve creates a digital currency which backs the digital currency created by the commercial banks. How is this okay? And so again, it can get worse in terms, but it's already 90% of what people are worried about. And in fact, on the issue of surveillance, they don't necessarily need a court order. And I have this graphic that
no, not for surveillance. No, because we don't know what the hell they're doing behind the scenes. It's easy to surveil you, either your bank, following what, I mean, there's a lot of different ways for agents of whatever caliber to be able to track what you're doing and surveil you.
Well, yeah. Well, let's talk about some of those. So they can get subpoenas and court orders, right? That's the normal process. They can use FinCEN requests. They can use financial intelligence units requests. There's Bank Secrecy Act reporting. So there's automatic triggers. If you take a certain amount, $10,000 out of your thing, it's automatically reported. Actually, if you take a certain amount of cash across state lines, that's not allowed unless you report it. All of that is like baked in. There is the Patriot Act, which gives the power to access financial records without subpoenas and court orders. And that is already in place, already abused. There is intelligence gathering. So there's NSA bulk data collection on financial transactions. There is something called a national security letter. And I remember, friends with a guy named Ladar Levison, who started a company called LavaBit. He was the email service provider for Edward Snowden. And I interviewed him once, and he told me a story about how the government approached him and they basically sued him and wanted information from him. And they gave him one of these national security letters. And the national security letter basically says that you can't talk to anyone, including a lawyer. So we don't even know how broadly used these national security letters are, but literally there are people who have had their funds seized. They can't speak about it publicly and can't even talk to a lawyer. So if people are sitting here worried about, oh, well, I don't want my financial information surveilled, this goes on today. This is already established. There are suspicious activity reports. Banks already are analyzing transactions and flagging things, right? So you travel somewhere and you go to use your debit card, and in certain cases, okay, yeah, it's fraud detection, right? But what is fraud detection? Fraud detection it's programmable, right? There's already programming in the money, and I'll get to that in a separate point. There's civil asset forfeiture. There's data sharing agreements. There's automated transaction monitoring. There's SWIFT monitoring for international transactions. There's mutual legal assistance treaties. So what governments can do back and forth with one another and kind of violate our rights for information is a whole next level. And now we have the IRS monitoring our financial transactions using AI. So if the IRS is already scanning our transactions, the NSA is doing bulk collection, there are all of these other tools, then again, what I'm saying is most people are unaware of this. Most people, if you listed this, would think that that's something that a dystopian CBDC would have associated with it, not the current system that we have today, which is overwhelmingly digital. So this is my point. My point is I've talked to these politicians. Part of running for president is I talked to some of the other candidates. I talked to Vivek Ramaswamy. He read my book. I spoke with, I tried to get to RFK. I spoke with Ted Cruz. I spoke with Cynthia Lummis. I spoke with Warren Davidson, a whole bunch of these people that are supposed to be anti-CBDC. Ted Cruz put in a bill an anti-CBDC bill because he was concerned that the central bank would unilaterally create a CBDC without Congress. I mean, and that sounds like it's noble. And, and his language around it it's because, he's anti this financial surveillance. Yet the central bank isn't the motivating player doing this. All of those things that I listed about surveillance, those are laws and rules passed by Congress. The central bank isn't going out of it. The central bank isn't going to create the social credit system. Congress is going to create the social credit system.
Yeah, they can't. So even the Federal Reserve, even right here on their website, they cannot do this without the approval of Congress and through laws. So, I mean, technically, the Federal Reserve just could, whether they wanted to or not, they could not create a central bank digital currency or anything close to it without the proper course of action, which, again, I could take it back to congressional approval and it actually getting approved as a law.
But again, so if the money's already digital and Congress is already passing the Bank Secrecy Act and KYC, AML, and all of this other stuff, then the politicians are making it like people like Ted Cruz are trying to make it look like the central bank is the bad guy and the central bank is the one that is wanting to implement the surveillance state. That is false.
That's the bad guy. I know but that's what politicians do. They point the finger and deflect.
Which is why I wrote this article and why I actually want to frame what CBDCs are. And I want to use this tyranny index so that when a politician speaks, I can evaluate it based on the understanding that we already have a digital system. And here's what shade of tyranny you're adding to it, because the Republicans and the Democrats are both adding tyranny to the system. They're adding it in different ways. So when the Republicans, like Cynthia Lummis, says, okay, she wants to ban algorithmic stablecoins outright. It's in her bill. It's in the Lummis-Gillibrand bill. So if anybody out there is listening and you bought into this Bitcoin conference Nashville thing, and you're like, oh, we have a seat at the table, and crypto, we have power now, and we're going to influence the political process, I strongly encourage you to read all of the bills. And my next article is going to be a summary of those bills. The bills are, in typical political form, they say the opposite of the rhetoric of the politicians. Cynthia Loomis is anti-privacy. She has stated explicitly that she's anti-privacy. She is only for public, transparent blockchains. She is trying to not explicitly ban algorithmic stablecoins. She is trying to go after Tether and the other folks by giving exclusive control over stablecoins to large regulated financial institutions in the United States. So when we sit here and we talk about the next level of programmability, okay, well, if Chase has a stablecoin that's programmable, yes, okay, we can argue that the government having to go through multiple different banks to program individual stablecoins is somewhat harder than dealing with one, but it's not that much harder, given how easy it is now to program these things and have access. I think even the censorship industrial complex, and actually following what happened in the work at the Brownstone Institute, this guy Andrew Lowenstein put together an incredible map that shows all of the organizations, nonprofits and government organizations that were working together using tools to not only just use AI to shadow ban us. There's a situation where if you were somebody that was speaking out against the vaccine or something, and you were a Stanford professor, they actually would log in and collaborate in human systems to say, okay, this guy just posted this. And so you had literally Pinterest and Facebook, you had representatives from all of the social media working on a human level to actually suppress content. And so, I guess I'm saying that it's not going to be very hard for them to control and program commercial bank stablecoins versus just a single central bank digital currency. So I guess my point is, I don't know what all the fuss is all about. You're not being heroic or saving people from financial surveillance by promoting bank issued stablecoins over a CBDC. That's a distinction without a difference. That we have to not let them get away with that, because it means the same thing for us at the end of the day, which is programmable money that can be monitored and censored, which we already have money that's programmable and can be censored and can be programmed. But the next level of it is more of that through commercial banks, or more of it through central banks, or a hybrid system. But mark my words, it's already digital. It's just more layers of tyranny. And we really have to frame it this way. And I'm going to call all of these politicians out when they do this, because I'm actually sick of, there are a lot of people that are like, oh, well, Trump says he will never sign a CBDC. And so they think that the issue is dead, not realizing they've had a CBDC and they're already being tracked. So it's important to try to actually control the narrative and understand the definition, which is why I wrote this article, because I kept on asking myself, I would argue that the anti-CBDC legislation passed in Florida bans the current money system, that somebody could actually take the anti-CBDC bill and say that the current system actually doesn't apply, or the current system doesn't fit. The current system is a CBDC, and you could actually go through and kind of ban that at the level of Florida. So anyway, we can go into, there's so many different ways to go off of this, but when I talk to people about what they think CBDCs are, again, you can have cash or you cannot have cash. It does not need to be tokenized. There's nothing in the definition of a central bank digital currency that says that it needs to be tokenized. The money system that we have right now, whether it's commercial banks or the central bank, runs on Oracle databases. They run on Microsoft databases. And guess what? Those things can be programmed. People have been programming Oracle and Microsoft databases for decades. So the idea that you need a token to program money is completely false. And as an example of this, look at a health savings account, a flexible spending account, FSA, and what Doconomy and MasterCard are building or have already built, which is a credit card that shuts off based on too much carbon usage. These are all things that exist today as programmable money on the existing system. So with a health savings account, the largest bank that issues health savings accounts is called Optum Bank. They have 5 million customers. It is a bank. When you get a card, an Optum card to use through Optum Bank, it determines what products you can and cannot buy. You can only buy certain healthcare items, and you can only buy them in certain stores. Right? This card can only be used maybe at Walgreens versus CVS. There's all kinds of programmability built into this. Prior to COVID, you couldn't use this card to buy over-the-counter medication. You actually had to get a doctor's note in order to be able to use an HSA to buy over-the-counter medicine. This is the existing system right now. So when people say, oh, yes, they're going to be able to program, and you're looking at this economy thing right now. Well, in the future, they're going to be able to program. I think that there's a sense that you need to upgrade the system, the technical system that we have right now, in order to be able to have programmable money. And what I'm saying is we already have programmable money with the existing system. They can use the existing system to determine what you can buy, where you can buy it, when you can buy it, and they can already set up a bunch of different rules that are tied to behavior and a whole variety of different factors. We don't need Congress or a technical overhaul to have that already exists. So that's important, because I think a lot of people think that there's some technological shift that has to happen to have programmability, and you don't. This do black card, people should be horrified by this. MasterCard has relationships with over 150 companies where they're tracking the carbon usage of your purchases in real time. So this isn't the future. They've been working on this for a long time. MasterCard has been working on this for ages. So there's already the ability to do these things. So when you think about the end game here of, well, I worry about they're going to shut off my money if I drive too far in my car, or if I fly too far. Well, they've already implemented that technology, and they didn't need a token, and they didn't need any kind of technical upgrade to the existing system. So, and I'm saying a lot of this because some of these were even my own misconceptions about this. I was like, oh, we have to stop CBDCs. And after really digging into all of this for a year and a half, it's like, okay, we have to acknowledge we already have this. And then the question is, and by the way, the answer is all the same. The answer is you have to exit fiat currency. There's no, like, I'm not even here to propose to write your congressman to unwind any of this stuff. We already have this, and the root of the issue is fiat currency itself, which is why we need to use alternative currencies that are separated from state. So the solution is no different, and that's what I've been saying for 18 months. But I want to alert people to how far gone we already are in terms of the surveillance and programmability of the existing system, and to not let these politicians fool you into thinking that they're going to stop something. Again, Ted Cruz, I'm against financial surveillance. He reauthorized the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act reauthorized these national security letters. So the things that you don't like about CBDCs, the politicians that tell you they're against CBDCs have actually voted for the things that already make that possible today. So key to know.
Okay. Now, I mean, I definitely listening to what you're saying. A lot of what what you came up to as your conclusion for your article makes sense. They have been progressively adding more parameters, fencing us in that much more slowly. I mean, this has been a plan. It's been, I mean, when you listen to the stuff about the Great Taking, that was a very methodical plan. These are very methodical plans. That we are progressively getting closer to that full-on totalitarian tyranny. I guess the way to put it. The reason I keep pushing back with the CBDC thing is because I don't think they're going to call it anything to do with CBDC in the United States. I think that name has just been so tainted and put out in the public so much, and they wanted that so that they could use different verbiage for the same damn thing. And
yeah,
that
exactly.
again, that's why the politicians keep saying we're not going to have a central bank digital currency, because under Donald Trump's administration, I think I might have mentioned it with you on this first conversation, he had Steve Mnuchin as his Treasury Secretary, who Steve Mnuchin worked with from One West Bank, worked with two gentlemen, Joseph Otting and Brian Brooks. Joseph Otting was the comptroller of the Treasury, and Brian Brooks ended up taking a position as a chief legal officer at Coinbase to help develop USDC in conjunction with Circle. He did a lot of interviews before he left talking about how the private sector should be developing these technologies, whether it's private bank digital currency, which I don't think they're going to call it that either, whether it's a stable coin. I just think that we should make people aware of all the different labels that they're trying to call it, because ultimately we're so dissected in the world with all the different technologies that are currently existing, even though we have like SWIFT and these different things that interconnect the banks. A uniledger situation is kind of what they're obviously going towards. And that would take us in that full-on tyranny with that programmability having no restrictions and no friction. And that's kind of where we get into the idea that Governments and financial institutions can just turn off your money, freezing your accounts, no privacy, obviously, with the surveillance, geographic spending limits. I mean, we don't see that kind of taking place yet, but it's something that, you know, we've heard in verbiage of like 15-minute city kind of stuff. Negative interest rates. We have automatic collection of government fines, tickets, any of that kind of stuff. Carbon credits, like you said, for traveling. Elimination of paper money. And the reason I feel like that would take place is because paper money gives you that aspect of privacy, unless they're microchipping and tracking the money, the physical cash itself. I don't see them giving us slaves an opportunity to have privacy. When you can't tip your stripper with $1, then you know there's a problem. And you know, I think we're heading to that direction. And I used to be a strip club DJ, so I've thought about this. Like, if we go to a cashless system, how does this work? Do I scan a girl's QR code to tip her? Am I tipping her central bank digital currency, stable coin? So I am looking forward to our conversation next week. And we haven't determined whether we're going to do it live or recorded, but we're going to have a conversation about privacy coins and alternative currencies. I think that combining them together, I think, would be great, because that's part of the solution of the things that we're talking about. The other thing I wanted to add, because you said a lot, the other thing I wanted to add was with Cynthia Loomis, the laser eye thing. Everything you said is correct. The other thing I want to add in is how she is so pro AML, KYC, AML. So that's where I've told people as well, like Donald Trump and all these other politicians talking about self-custody, how they're going to keep self-custody. But the problem with these politicians is that self-custody, in my mind, is going to come at the price of KYC, AML. So it's like, yeah, you can possess and control your cryptocurrency, but we want to know that you have it so that we can properly tax you.
Yeah, so there's a lot with this. In fact, so again, my whole point is I wanted to actually just control the narrative and say, look, because people don't know, they don't think about the fact that the system that we have.
Thank you, T-Will.
They don't think about the fact that nobody knows that the Federal Reserve uses an Oracle database. It's been interesting to research the evolution of money at the Federal Reserve itself. I actually haven't seen anybody really talk about how all of this works. And so when I started digging into this, I'm like, wow, like this really does work like this. This is kind of horrendous. But I tell people that, you know, yeah, we have a digital central bank digital currency. We have commercial digital currency, but all of it operates on databases. All of the databases can be programmed, and there are already multiple levels of tyranny implemented that are worse than most people think. I mean, there's Operation Choke Point. I've got a list of 20 different categories of businesses. I guess maybe it's just most of the people that I know, myself included, have either lost a bank account or had funds frozen. I mean, just like I had a situation with my last company. I actually used a check writing service. A company that had been in business for 30 years in Connecticut, because it was cheaper to have them, because we were rewarding employees that participated in our program. So we had tens of thousands of checks that we had to send out every week, and that was not efficient for us to do. And so this company that had been in business for 30 years had thousands of clients in different industries, including Fortune 500 companies. And the Attorney General came in and said, well, we think that one of your customers is involved in illegal offshore gaming. So they froze the funds of everybody, because basically they were pooling their customers' funds into one account and then writing the checks off of it. So they literally just came in and froze everybody's account. So I had nurses, I had like thousands of people across the country that now were going to have checks that bounced. And then when we went to the DOJ, we're like, hey, look, can we give you this money? And can we show that, we don't screw up all of our customers and create this horrible situation with these people that are improving their health, participating in our program? And they said no. So we were determined guilty. I had to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and months to get my own money back. And then I had to actually figure out how to cut my own checks, right? So they did this just like that. And it's, again, Nick Fuentes, I mentioned the Bitcoin example. He's lost five bank accounts. I talked to Mike Adams, Health Ranger. He can't get a bank account. People can't get credit card processing. So a lot of people just aren't aware of this. And these aren't people that are even engaged in criminal behavior. People that are selling, products that are related to health. There's nothing even, nobody's even under investigation, and they don't have access to banking services. That's today. There is no future this will happen, or you'll be shut off. You just don't know when your name is going to be called, when your industry is going to be called. But if you're guns, religious organizations, adult content, whatever it happens to be, obviously if you're in cannabis, even if it's somewhere that's legal, that's a whole other separate set of issues. 20 categories of businesses that are already like that. So to me, it's already central bank digital currency as a baseline. It's already really bad. That's the important part to say. There's already surveillance and monitoring. There's already control mechanisms. But I've come up with kind of 7 different categories and ways of evaluating how they ratchet up the tyranny. And so there's surveillance and monitoring. And I'm going to start with what the actual end game is, and then we can work our way back.
Was this anything with the images that you had sent to me earlier?
Yeah, those were the images. I wish I had put those images in the document. I didn't have them at the time. The document's got a lot of text, it's very text heavy. But I decided to create some simpler images because I wanted to create an index in a visual way of representing what I'm talking about. And so I sent you. So there's the.
Well, this is directly from our messages on X because I didn't have a chance to download.
Yep. So I mean, I just came up with this. Again, this isn't in a final form, but I wanted to start discussing a framework and actually get people's feedback on it and everything else. But I think this is a good way to evaluate it. Again, so when a politician says something, the response is we already have a central bank digital currency. Here's what you're adding from a tyranny perspective. So Cynthia Loomis, you want to add more KYC AML. You want to ban stablecoins. Okay, that's a 50-point hit on the tyranny index, right? I think it's important to put tools like this together so that we don't let them get away with this, because so often these politicians, and it's frustrated me to no end with the Bitcoin community, and particularly a lot of Bitcoin maxis, who will see a bill, the Blockchain Freedom Act or the this act, and they'll cheer it on and they don't read it. I mean, you could put in a bill that says we're going to round up everybody that has self-custody crypto and put them in front of a firing squad. And most people would cheer it because they didn't read the bill. They just read
Too long, didn't read. TLDR. Come on, man. That's the society we live in. It's a TikTok age. People can't even freaking pay attention for like more than like a minute.
That's absolutely true. And so and they know that, and this is important. So I look at it, this tyranny index, there's surveillance and monitoring. So there's kind of minimal surveillance.
Will you go over this? I want to put it on the full screen. Will you go over this in its entirety? And I'm going to be right back as you're talking about this.
Absolutely. So this is I'm going to call this a draft. So again, if you've got feedback on it, if you look at it, it's like, oh, this misses this or whatever. This is an ongoing rolling process. I just wanted to start. So the first category for CBDC tyranny is surveillance and monitoring. So there's minimal surveillance, and I would argue we're already at moderate surveillance because we already have NSA bulk data collection. We already have the Patriot Act. We already have KYC AML. We already have, and now we have the IRS using AI. I mean, from my perspective, if the IRS is already using AI with your bank, I mean, what exactly is it that you're keeping from the government at this point? It's you're pretty much already giving. You could argue you're using cash, but again, that's 8% of transactions. Cash is not really a viable solution at this point. And there's tracking coming with that as well. So we're moderate today. Total surveillance is where they want to go, which is where it's just completely AI-powered monitoring of all transactions in real time centrally. So that's kind of the end state of this. Then there are the controlled mechanisms. So there's no spending restrictions at all. You can use your money wherever you want to. Then there's moderate control. So spending rules with some restrictions. Well, actually, I would argue, and I didn't even put this, we really already have that. I mean, there are certain places where you can't use debit cards today. I know I've experienced this on multiple occasions. And there are issues where, you never know when you're going to be able to use a particular card. This has been true with crypto debit cards. But remember, even crypto debit cards are associated with a bank. So at the end of the day, there's a bank issuing the debit card. In the end, it's total control where you're programmed what it is that you can and cannot buy, probably tied to some kind of a social credit score. So that's the end state there. Then on the CBDC tyranny index, again, this idea of cashless. You can still have cash and have a CBDC. And most CBDCs contemplate that. Nobody's out of the gates banning cash. Now, is that their intention? Sure, over time, gradually, but nobody's leading with that. Tokenization. You do not have to have tokenization to have a CBDC. You can have an Oracle database or a Microsoft database like we currently have. Tokenization does add some to the programmability, but right now look at it as you have an account in a database whereas tokenization is the programmability of the unit of money itself. Okay, once again, they're both programmable. Whether you're programming at the account level or at the level of the tokenized representation of the dollar, it's still programmable. Who's the issuer? Is it the central bank only? Is it stable coins? Is it just through commercial banks, or is it some hybrid structure? You can have any of those combinations. There's nothing that strictly says there's only a central bank involved in a central bank digital currency. And in fact, even China has a two-tiered system for this as well.
No, but isn't it's in the name? It's called central bank, and in China's case, it's issued by the Central Bank of China, the People's Bank of China, right?
It is, but we have a digital central bank digital currency here. That's what the federal government writes all of their checks on. All of the bills that are paid by the federal government are paid out of a central bank digital currency in an Oracle database sitting at the Federal Reserve. So
right, just a transfer of digits on a screen.
So it's a transfer of digits on the screen.
An accounting system with credits and debits.
Right. So we have that, and we have a commercial bank. And remember, the commercial bank also owns the central bank. So this is why I'm like people making a big deal about whether or not it's just the central bank. We do have a central bank digital currency, and we have a commercial bank digital currency, and they interact with each other. And the commercial banks own the Federal Reserve. So I kind of like that.
I can dig that. The way that you said that, I can dig. I can see that now. Yeah, I mean. It's like trying to go into a complete digitalization, because that's where they're talking. No, we'll talk about this in future shows, and you've covered it as well. Is tokenizing everything, real world assets, just everything being tokenized. So when you can have your ID digitized, tokenized, however you want to look at it, it's putting everything in that system, because that gives more total control and easier control when everything is on, in a sense, a uniledger, or at least a, like I call them, bridge assets, where all these different mechanisms are interconnected by these bridges, like M-Bridge from the Bank of International Settlements. Because I know there was a lot of talk, like a couple months ago, the most recent country that I heard got involved in the testing was Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and before I wrote this article, I wrote an even longer article because to actually lay all this out. It's on the Brownstone site.
We covered that on that first episode that me and you did together, and that's like, even listening to the audio of that is an hour long. So it's a great article.
Yeah, it's long, but the point is that everything is in a database. All commerce exists on different databases. Money is one type of database. If you're buying and selling a car or a house or something else, you're dealing with some kind of central database. Tokenization is just the evolution of the database. And let's face it, centralized databases are hacked all of the time. I mean, it's very problematic, right? There's a reason that blockchain technology and some of these other systems were developed. There are huge security flaws, and it's trillions of dollars a year of lost economic productivity because of hacking related to these central databases. So tokenization is just the next level. Money is one kind of asset that can be tokenized. It represents about 5% of overall global assets, but the other 95% they plan on tokenizing as well. And in fact, on a uniledger tied to CBDCs that can be programmed and monitored and censored in the very same way. That is how you get to Klaus Schwab's "you will own nothing and be happy," is through the tokenization of things on centralized systems. The answer to that is to use self-custody privacy systems, which we'll talk about more next week. But make no mistake, a lot of people say to me, well, I don't see the use for tokenization. Once you understand everything's already in a database anyway, you'll understand that the tokenization is inevitable. It's just a question of freedom versus tyranny. So to finish up the index, there's globalization. So are you now dealing with a national currency, or are we moving towards a regional, like the euro, or a global currency? And the end state is, and I'll talk about this in a second, I'll tell you what the ultimate form of digital tyranny is, the CBDC tyranny index, in a second. And then crypto regulation. That's another component on this tyranny index. And this is why I think a lot of our friends are either in prison or facing legal action, because I think a big part of the ability to truly enforce central bank digital tyranny is by shutting off censorship resistant alternatives. And so what is the stance related to that? So there's no restriction on crypto, forced registration on a common ledger. So I want to talk about this because, again, people will say, well, the Republicans are great on this crypto, but There's something being developed called regulated liability network, which is basically one ledger that will track CBDCs and other digital assets. And so the IRS is now going to require us to report our self-custody crypto holdings. It isn't too long before we're going to have to register even our self-custody holdings on this common ledger that can be tracked. And so, and believe me, the Republicans will be on, Loomis will be all over that. She'll be excited about that. That'll be a bipartisan effort. Then there's a ban on privacy coins. That's one level of CBDC tyranny. And then there's an outright ban on crypto. So this is my first stab at kind of the larger buckets, and then, you know, the severity on the point system of ways of looking at, well, where are we? How bad is it today? What does the worst case scenario look like? And then as we are dealing with politicians putting forward legislation and people talking about things, how does that add to and work within this paradigm? And I will say, there isn't a single member of Congress or person running for president of the United States that is proposing anything that will reduce the tyranny index. So I want to be very clear on that. And when I write my next article, I will expound on that. But there's nobody proposing reducing tyranny in our existing digital monetary system.
No, it's right wing, left wing, same bird. And in order for the bird to fly straight, you need both wings.
Exactly. And so then there's one, if you have the one at CBDC tyranny index.
I had to pull them. Is this the tyranny index to 45 to 20 or 45
well,
200?
Let's go with the 200 out of 200, because it might be easier to talk about what the real end state is, because it also provides some clarity on maybe even who's behind it. Because again, you mentioned earlier, it's like, yeah, they like to point fingers. The politicians like to make the central banks look like the bad guys, and the central bankers like to make the politicians look like the bad guys, and they're all bad, and they're all moving in one direction. This is the ultimate tyranny, and this is actually what they're moving towards. This is why I talk about that Doconomy MasterCard, because we are dealing with a situation where what's being pushed here is global technocracy. What's being pushed is one global government with one single digital currency that is backed by energy credits. This has been the mission statement of the technocrats since the 1930s. So the final form of, and I don't even know if you would call it central bank digital currency at this point, because I don't know what role banks, I don't know how that would all work. But in essence, you have total surveillance, AI-powered monitoring in real time, integrated with the social credit system. You have a single issuer, globally enforced. Everything is tokenized. All assets are digitized and controlled. And this is not only monetary, but also non-monetary assets. It's a global system tied to UN Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are probably the elements of a social credit system. There's absolute control over spending, complete programmability tied into the social credit system. It's fully cashless, and crypto is completely banned. That is the end goal. That's what a one world global government technocracy looks like. So we won't be able to talk about this if it ever gets to that point, because I'm sure our speech will be regulated. So let's warn about, let's never get to this point, but that is kind of that's the end game of all of this. And then understand everything that they're doing slice by slice moves us one step closer in each of these categories to this complete, what I call enslavement level of CBDC tyranny. You're muted.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens, my friend. I was trying to pull up an image that I wanted to show you. I wanted to see how this pulled up. And this comes from the Bank of International Settlements. I'm not sure if you've ever seen any of my interviews with Lynette Zhang, or if you're familiar with her.
I'm familiar with her. I haven't seen the interviews.
Okay. I've interviewed her since like 2018. I've known her for a while. She's good people, but she has talked about this money flower example that is used by the BIS, kind of giving an idea of the different currencies that would be used. Let's see if I can enlarge this by any chance. It's not going to look good. Okay, so I'm not sure what all these different things are, like Pokey coin. That makes no sense, but you have different, and this is actually looks like it's not incomplete. This looks a little bit different than, I guess it's in some, I don't know. It looks a little bit different, but you can see how it gives a little bit of aspect here for Bitcoin, precious metal coins, and things to that effect. I don't think this is the exact one I wanted to share, but it was something to that effect, because the Bank of International Settlements is looking at all these different things that would be used. And if you look at the money flower graph, it's just a small portion of what the system would be. But none of these are talking about having physical cash, because that kind of gets away from the idea of having a surveillance system, like, unless, again, it's microchipped money. And it's possible our money could be microchipped. So
it is, and I think I sent you an image on that as well, just as the different technologies that are actually being pursued on that. So again, this is why I look at cashless, or even you have cash, but they add chips. I should probably add that as one of the elements of this tyranny index. This tyranny index will expand with more points on it, but I like looking at it this way because we already have tyranny. This is why I did it. The whole 50 Shades of Gray was kind of the metaphor for this entire system. What level are we at? Starting at, we're at the bondage level today, and we're moving.
Yeah, I thought that was creative. I thought that was creative. And then the tyranny, the elephant shackles and donkey shackles. This is very creative as well. So
yeah,
I don't know what you're smoking on, but I would like for you to share some of it.
I think it's a lack of sleep is the primary thing at this point. But I thought it was I thought they were good metaphors because, again, I want people to understand both parties are adding to the tyranny. They both have, and when I modeled this off of the actual legislation and talking points of the people in both political parties. I mean, I've listened to what's the guy's name? I talked to him, Senator from Oregon, anyway, I could picture him. So he's like, his view is he doesn't like the central bank. He just wants the government to directly issue a currency that's completely programmable with all of the tyranny features. And so it's Ron Wyden. So people will be like, so Ron Wyden has sounded good on certain issues from time to time. And people are like, oh yeah, no, this guy doesn't like central banks. Yeah, I don't like central banks either. But it's, whether the government is issuing the currency through a middleman or directly, the government is the problem. And then the central bank is just an added problem. So, having the government issue digital currency directly is not a good solution. And I probably should factor that into this as well. So, so I came up with some arbitrary, okay, so we're at 45 today out of 200 with our current CBDC and tyranny index. And, I tried to show in this example how we would get to this next level of, elephant shackles, or I actually should have added it's a servitude. So it's bondage, servitude, and total enslavement are kind of the high level categories. And then elephant shackles and donkey shackles are the branding for each of the political parties to show their particular attempt.
I get you now. Okay. I thought it was different levels of enslavement. Like, because it doesn't take it would take heavier chains to shackle an elephant than it would a donkey. That's what I took it as. But this makes sense. The red, the blue, the right, the left.
Yeah, I need to work on the visuals again. It's a work in progress, but the Republicans, what this basically shows is that the Republicans they're all over the surveillance. They're all over the Patriot Act. They're all over. Nobody's really pushing. There are a couple people, but most people are all rah about KYC AML. You're not finding any real pushback on that, and it's actually gotten ridiculous. I know the last time I did set up a bank account was when I actually ran for governor in New Hampshire. And I had a bank account. I think it was TD Bank. I had a bank account there before. And then I'm like, okay, I need an account for my political campaign. And I had to go back to the bank 3 times to go through their new enhanced Know Your Customer. I'm like, I've been here. I've been at the same address. I had an account here for 8 years. And you are literally making me come back multiple times. I'm just like, it's absurd. But anyway, they're all for that. The Republicans are more on we're against the central bank, but let's give complete control to the commercial banks for stable coins. They're against privacy coins. I mean, not all of them, but Loomis certainly is. And to the extent that she's the lead, what we should be really worried about is that they pass any crypto legislation, because again, none of it is good. But if they actually pass something before this election, it'll be disastrous, because the starting point for the legislation is this Loomis-Gillibrand bill. So look up the Loomis-Gillibrand bill, and I guarantee you, if you read that bill, all of you will be like, this is horrible. Well, understand that's the best case scenario. Now that Chuck Schumer came in and said, we want to try to get something done, they will start with that and then make it even worse.
Is this something that stems out of the executive order 14067? Is that the correct number?
I don't think this was it was independent of that. I don't. It might be, but it would be bizarre if Loomis was actually kind of following the direction.
Well, Gillibrand's a
that.
Democrat, though, right?
Gillibrand is a Democrat. Loomis is not. I don't think that this is explicitly, but I mean, nevertheless, 14067 is the executive order that basically authorizes a whole of government approach to the regulation of digital assets. And that's what's going on. So everything that's going on with the IRS, everything that's going on with Roger, and everything that's going on, with Ian and Tornado Cash and all of these different people, all of these different federal departments that are going after people for different things, that has been ratcheted up because of this executive order. I think that the congressional thing is separate. But nevertheless, it's awful. If you read it, it might as well be part of this because it's actually that bad. I couldn't believe actually reading it, and then like the disconnect in my mind, watching people share these articles with Cynthia Loomis and like laser eyes, and like you clearly did not read these bills.
Oh, I mean, I was at the Bitcoin conference, and she was trying to brag that she was the Bitcoin Congress, or is she a senator?
She's a senator.
Yeah, Bitcoin senator, because they were trying to, not that Trump was saying this, but people were calling him the Bitcoin president. So she wanted to be the Bitcoin senator. But again, they both were saying similar things, especially when it comes to the self-custody. It's just it's word magic. It's tricking people into thinking, hey, like I'm good with this. But again, it's like people don't realize that your self-custody, you being able to custody your own cryptocurrencies and anything else is going to be reliant upon KYC AML. So they know who the hell you are. You don't have that financial privacy, which is something that we're supposed to have the right to. So it's, and the sad thing is that I've also been thinking about is with this progression of different parameters that they've been doing to kind of clamp down the financial system and add all these different layers to box us in more and more. It's just slowly boiling the frog. And a lot of people have still not woken up to it. So it almost makes me wonder, like, what is it really going to take to get the majority to wake up?
Well, I will say I've actually been thinking about this for a while. I was going to build a site to do this, and then I got derailed by some of this. So I wrote this article to provide a framework, but the real way to do it is to share personal stories. So I'd like to interview people that have already been victims to this. So I want to interview Nick Fuentes. I want to interview Mike Adams. I want to interview all of these Canadian truckers. Bring these personal stories because there are so many of them. I mean, I know my Twitter feed constantly seeing people that are getting debanked or have these horrendous situations that come up. So personal stories are the best way to sell this. I just wanted to put together a comprehensive framework to make all of this make sense so that when the politician addresses one particular story and then makes it look like they've resolved the entire situation, to realize, no, there's an avalanche. There's a an encyclopedia. There's a Harry Potter series of stories here about people that have already been dealing with tyranny within the banking system. And so that's the way to do it. And to make it more relatable. I mean, people, again, in the health freedom area, people, it's overwhelming to figure out how to put that together. So this is just intended to be a framework, but sharing those personal stories, I think, is it. I mean, it's kind of like first they came for the gun store owners, and I didn't do anything because I wasn't a gun store owner. And then I actually did that with the choke point thing, and it's like a list of 25 different categories.
Wow.
And so, I try to play off of that, but that's what it's going to be. It's going to be personal stories, right? It's like, I've been trying to tell people to get out of banks and move into alternative assets. And as much as I can go do that all I want, but one bank run and one picture of people or video of people not being able to get their money out of the bank will do, a million X what me warning people in advance will do. And that's fine. It's important, though, to write these things and to get this content out there so that when those emergencies happen, people actually have something to refer to make sense and context of what's going on. That's essentially why I put that article out. And by the way, the article is this is very controversial. I've been shadow banned on everywhere. No one's fact checked this. I mean, Zero Hedge picked it up, and TikTok, literally, I actually ran some account check, and I did on my own podcast, I did a short explanation of, well, not short, actually half an hour explanation of this article. And it said it won't boost it. And it said, well, this is a conspiracy theory. I'm like, what's the conspiracy theory? Fact check this. What fact is wrong about this?
It's the 4-letter word of what we're talking about today. I don't think it's very favorable to the algorithms, to the social medias, like the YouTubes and the TikToks. They don't like it. There's a lot. I mean, I've actually seen a lot of content creators that try to avoid saying CBDC, that try to avoid saying central bank digital currency because they don't want to get shut down. Now, I mean, it's not like I'm talking about something terrible. So if I get shut down for saying the word CBDC, that so be it, because I'm building on other platforms. Make sure you're following me on Rumble, X. I got links down below. You can find all my socials at RiceTVx.com. So it's like you almost don't even know what you can and can't say anymore in today's day and age. And the closer that we get to the elections, the more that they're actually kind of clamping down, because I've had videos removed on both of my channels in the past month and a half. One got a strike on the Rice Against the Grain side, and they just removed the video with a warning for an interview that I did back in 2020. So they will retroactively go after your shit, which is insanely crazy. After we're done with the live stream, I'll put a link for this article in the video description. And if you actually click on the Brownstone Institute link here at the very top, it'll take you right to the Brownstone page, and you can actually listen to the article as well. And it takes about 30 minutes or so. So I would encourage you to check out the article and also check out Aaron's book, The Final Countdown. Basically, everything that he's teaching in his classes that he's been doing around the United States. And I think that you're planning on taking that abroad. But man, first of all, I want to say I appreciate everything that you're doing to educate people and staying hyper focused on educating people about programmable currency, programmable money, CBDCs, and the such, and teaching people and suggesting to people about alternative currencies and using counter economics and not supporting the system. Before we wrap up, going to have links down below for, and this is already in the video description, your X account at Aaron R. Day. I'm going to have the link for your Rumble channel as well as your YouTube channel. I encourage people to make sure you're subscribed. Again, make sure you're checking out the book, purchase the book over on Amazon, and you can check out the article either on Zero Hedge or Brownstone. I'll have both links down below in the video description. And this brings us to the Daylight Foundation, Daylight Freedom yeah, my screen share thing is blocking the bottom part of the screen, so I couldn't exactly see what it was saying, and I was trying to look at the URL as I was reading it. So the Daylight Freedom Foundation, this is where you can find information about your workshops, correct?
Workshops and also I'm working on trying to either buy or build or partner or build a point of sale system and a wallet. So the way that we win on this is we need to have tools that are multi-asset, that are private, and that are easy to use, that are easier to use than what they're building with CBDCs. And I will say this, when you look at these enhanced tyranny things that they're bringing to the equation, they are focused on usability. And that's the problem that in the crypto community we have to actually deal with. They are figuring out how to make, like, there will be a lot of tyranny and surveillance involved, but it will be so easy to use. And so we have no excuse if what we offer isn't as easy to use, and doesn't and has transaction fees that are equal to or lower than what they put out. If we're not competitive, then we're going to lose, because people will actually take the convenience of this. And they've been
doing it. It's proof with the way banks work. I mean, I'm sure most young people have never even written a check. So when you talked about a check service, they're like, "What the hell is he talking about? What is that?"
Yeah, no, well, and since Bitcoin was launched, we've had Venmo and Zelle and Apple Pay and Google Pay and soon X payments. And so we don't even Circle with USDC, they're doing tap to pay. Like, we have to have that level of simplicity. This needs to be something if your blind grandmother can't use it, then it's failed as money. And this is so often the case. Like, people say to me, well, yeah, Bitcoin, you can add privacy to it. It's like, yeah, great. If again, if you have to have 15 years of programming experience to make your money private, you've already failed. Like, just out of the gates, that's a non-starter. You need to have a solution that anybody can use. And so that's part of the Daylight Freedom side as well. I'm kind of calling for people that want to work on that or partner on that. And then you can see all of my interviews and links to all of my articles. So there's quite a bit of content on there. These workshops, though.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of like wrap up things with your workshops, like what you're teaching and what your next events are.
So the workshops, so the next, so I'm doing one of these a month because I also do kind of mini workshops within other people's events. So I'm doing my own kind of dedicated 4-hour workshop. The next one is in New Jersey on October the 5th. And the whole point of this is, so I wrote my book to be a freestanding book that somebody could read. And the target audience for this was, I wanted a boomer with limited technical experience to be able to read my book, understand what CBDCs are, understand the threat, understand a little bit about money and about the inevitable failure of fiat currency, give the fundamentals of kind of blockchain and crypto, and also the use of gold and silver as money. That's like the first half of the workshop. The last half is intended to be empowering. So I've been living on alternative assets, on crypto, gold, and silver since 2019. And what I found is that people who read the book, the back half of the book tells you how to do it. It says, go here and download a wallet. Here's how you can pay your bills using crypto. Here's how you can do all of this. And people said to me, well, now I understand the problem, but I just couldn't get myself to download a wallet. I just couldn't figure out how to get started with this. So I did these workshops so that coming out of the workshop, you will have a crypto wallet. You will have one or more forms of cryptocurrency. You will have a gold back, and then you will have all of the information where I explain how I've been living on these alternative currencies, how I pay bills, how I do things on a day-to-day basis. Because my whole mission on all this isn't just to spread doom, and I'm not pessimistic. I'm actually optimistic that we can actually have a future based on decentralization and free will, and that this is an opportunity to create something that's not the Great Reset, but that is decentralized in nature. But I want to make sure people take that first actual step. So that's the whole purpose of these 4-hour workshops. So we have one coming up, New Jersey, October the 5th. We have Omaha on November the 9th at Creighton University. And tentatively, we're trying to finalize the venue, but we will be doing Nashville, it looks like, on December the 14th. And then we're starting to map out everything from there. But if you go to the daylightfreedom.org site and you go to Empower and you see those cities, if there's a city that you want us to host one of these, fill out the form. These forms are a lifesaver for us because I don't have very many people. It's me and my wife and a friend of mine working on this. And so these forms, this is how I determine which cities we go to, is based on demand of people filling out these forms. And the biggest issue with this is it's finding a venue. So if you're like, oh, I'd love to have you come to, whatever, Pennsylvania or Arizona or whatever it is, and I know this great venue, then fill that out. And that'll actually be a big factor in prioritizing where we go. I go to where the real passion and interest is. That's what motivates me to do this. I'm not trying to push this from the top down in any geographic location.
Yeah, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but somebody had reached out to me about the New Jersey workshop, and I promoted it on my X account. And I think there's a 25% discount code underneath of that post if you find it on my X account. So check that out if you guys are interested. So yeah, I mean, if you would like to have Aaron come out to where you live, your city, and educate the people around you, maybe help you with education with some of your friends and family, this would be a great opportunity. Fill out this form, because these links for all of Aaron's socials and his website are already in the video description. And I will be adding, after we're done, I will be adding the other links as well, so that people can check those out if they want to read any of those articles or any of those resources in their entirety. So
yeah, and I'm gonna make this information. Eventually, I'm gonna have an online version. Although I will say there is nothing that beats the in-person experience. I mean, you can see the picture on the screen there. That was from an event that we did in San Jose. There's nothing like sitting in front of a group of 100 people trying to onboard them to crypto in person to learn about how effective or ineffective these tools are. And that provides and informs me to know, okay, well, we need a point of sale system that does this. We need a wallet that does this. And so I'm going to always continue to do the in-person because it really helps. But I'm also going to do online courses, and then I'm going to make my recommendations. I'm going to create a section of the site where I explain to people what I'm using at the current time, because I'm always testing new things. And so this is important. Even if you buy the book right now, I'm updating the book. And it even says in that book, this is a moving target in terms of which cryptos to use and everything else. And just within the last 90 days, I would say I've had the realization that we have to focus on privacy. that actually has to be a top priority. And that wasn't the case when I wrote the book originally, and that hadn't been the case even in how I've been using crypto. But the combination of what we've seen with chain analysis, people being tracked, and then what they have in store through this legislation, if we're going to escape this 50 shades of tyranny, we're going to have to do it by having a technical ability to retain privacy of our financial transactions.
Again, such a great title for that article. Cave Climbing Extreme was saying he's in the UK and unfortunately can't make the workshop. Now, have you mentioned doing something outside of the United States?
Yeah, so there's a Greater Reset event in Mexico. So I'm going to be going to Mexico a couple of times. And so I'm going to be doing kind of a mini workshop there. And I've actually had people request from everywhere from, Canada to South Africa to New Zealand. And obviously it's a high bar for me to do that just because of the cost and time involved. But obviously I'm tracking these CBDCs on an international basis. And so if the right set of circumstances emerges, and if somebody is really on the cutting edge and they're in a country where it's going at a hyper accelerated pace, I'm open to doing it, and may even do online versions as well.
Well, depending, man. I mean, I'm not saying that I know the answer to this or I can make the suggestion, but there is a possibility of getting like some kind of sponsorship where you could actually have, like, let's say there's a wallet that has a lot of the things that we want to utilize. And maybe they could foot the bill for a lot of this, in addition to charging at the events for people to attend. Because if you're going to go to another country, I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be an admission fee like there is here. So,
and we do have some sponsors, and that's actually been something that we've really been developing as well. So there are a lot of ways to do it. So for me right now, though, if you are interested in this, I encourage you to fill out the form ASAP, because I'm trying to map out all of next year. I mean, there's already stuff kind of going into March. So I want to, schedule this stuff out, because logistics are the biggest challenge that I'm dealing with right now. So I just want to reach as many people as quickly as I can, because we don't have a lot of time on this. And I will say, as a philosophical thing, because a lot of people say to me, oh, well, normies will never accept this. This is, I can't imagine my mother doing this or my aunt doing this or whatever. That's often feedback. But this is like any adoption curve for technology or a new idea. You don't start mainstream. You don't start thinking about the mainstream. You start with innovators, the 2.5%. And there are people already there, people in the health freedom space, people in the food freedom space, people, Second Amendment groups. I've put together a list of 20 different groups that have already been oppressed by the federal government, are already having issues with financial transactions, representing millions of people all over the country. So I want to talk to those people first. This isn't, I don't want to go on MSNBC and talk about this. All that would do is get people upset and angry, and people wouldn't understand it. I want to go to people that already are aware that there's a problem, that are actively looking for a solution. And if we can work within those communities to get the right combination of wallets and point of sale systems, then as they ratchet up the tyranny even further, we can provide a solution that scales and is easy to use to others as it moves more into the mainstream. So that's my strategy with all of this as well.
Yeah.
So this is, I think we can do it. I am optimistic. It's just that time is not on our side.
Well, I like the way you put it too, because if we are being slowly boiled like frogs and they're turning up the heat, we definitely need to have have stuff built out for those that are starting to feel the warmth and want out. So I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Again, stay tuned. We haven't decided whether we're going to do it live or we're going to do it recorded, but we are doing a conversation next week that we're going to be focusing on privacy coins. We're going to be talking about alternative currencies, precious metals, gold backs, things to that effect. Solutions is the main thing this kind of comes down to. And you can live without a bank. It is possible. I use a bank, and I've talked about this in previous videos, but I use a bank just for very minimal purposes. I only keep enough in my bank to cover whatever bills that I need to cover. Otherwise, I tell people this, with where we're headed, it's easier for you to deposit money as you need to than it will be for you to withdraw money as you need to. And some people are already experiencing that, depending on how much money that you're trying to actually withdraw from your bank. So you can do it without a bank. You can also use credit unions, but you can do it without a bank. It's just the system has been set up, as you said. We need something that's going to be convenient and easy to use, because if you think about what you said as far as like building out technologies and limiting it or pushing it, we wouldn't have programmable remote controls if they were thinking about old people, because today old people still are having problems with these programmable remote controls. So I definitely understand what you're saying, man, and I appreciate the conversations. I appreciate what you're doing. I'm looking forward to the next one that we do.
Yeah, and I do want to say one thing about this, because I was introduced to Bitcoin by really kind of at the same time by Ian Freeman and Roger Ver, and Roger in particular at a Free State conference in 2012, and I will say that, and we'll talk about this next week, but I've become very interested in, and I've been spending a lot of time on a project called Zono. And I encourage people to
highlight it right here in your profile. It's the only thing with the hashtag.
It's the only thing with the hashtag. Well, so Roger introduced it to me, and when he saw a interview that I did talking about the importance of point of sale systems and everything else, he's like, you really should look at Zono. And I'm like, well, okay, Roger's been pretty on the mark on this. So I decided, yeah, I'll do a deep dive. So I read the white paper and everything else. And so Roger's always been about peer-to-peer digital cash for everyone as a way of spreading freedom. And I actually think this might be, I'm not a maxi of any approach. We actually need a multi-asset approach, but I encourage you, I haven't been as excited about a crypto or a solution since I first heard about Bitcoin in 2012. This technology actually solves a lot of problems. It allows for not only private crypto that you can use just for day-to-day purchases, but allows you to create privacy tokens using the same underlying technology. So we talk about the fact that you will own nothing and be happy is about not only tokenizing money, but stocks and bonds and everything else and putting it on a central ledger. This is an ability to tokenize assets and trade them privately and in your own self-custody. So I look forward to talking about this one and others next week. But if in case people are probably not aware of this, because it's a small project. I mean, in terms of like market cap and everything, although it's been around for years, they've been working on the technology for years, and the devs behind it were behind CryptoNote, which is the tech behind Monero. So this is real tech, and so I encourage people to take a look and maybe even download a wallet. And if you're interested, ping me, and I'll send you a little, just because it's fascinating in terms of the problems that it solves in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, no, I have heard Roger mention it, and I'm definitely wanting to learn more, and I haven't had as much of an opportunity to sit down and do that, and that's why I wanted to have the conversation with you. I know that a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to be Zono related. I do want to talk about obviously other privacy coins, talk about some of the privacy protocols, because I don't want to get into a lot of it right now. We'll save it for the next conversation, but we got a lot to cover. And again, it's all more solution based. This is more like talking about the central bank digital currencies as a way for just people to be aware. We need to educate people as much as possible and provide that education to anybody that's willing to listen. So again, I'm going to have links down below for Aaron's X account, for his website, daylightfreedom.org, for his Rumble account, for his YouTube channel, for the book, The Final Countdown, and for his newest article, The 50 Shades of CBDCs, of Central Bank Digital Currency. So I can't even talk. 50 Shades of Central Bank Tyranny. I did it, my friend. We did it. We did it together. Awesome. It's been a great stream.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it. I thought live worked well. I don't, you know.
Yeah, I think we're good to do this. I think if you're good for the live, I'm good for the live, and I think we have talked Tuesday. Do we want to do 2, or do we want to do a different time?
2's fine. I'm actually fairly open on Tuesday, I think. Actually,
okay. Well, before we commit to a specific time, Tuesday, be on the lookout. I'll probably schedule it, if I can, hopefully, more than likely, Monday afternoon, Monday evening, so you guys will be aware. Make sure you hit the notification bell on both of our YouTube channels so that you can possibly, potentially, maybe be notified by YouTube if the algorithm decides to. That seems to be a little bit of a problem. Also, make sure that you're still subscribed. If you're not already subscribed, I encourage you to subscribe. But if you are subscribed or you think you're subscribed, make sure, because you may not be subscribed. That's the kind of games that YouTube's been playing lately. You got any final thoughts, my friend, before we wrap up?
No, just as a final thought, I would say please read the article. I really do. I think I make the case that we already have a central bank digital currency, or at the very least, we clearly have a digital currency that is hybrid between the central banks and commercial banks. It's already highly surveilled. It's already programmable. And so we're just now talking about shades of tyranny. So I want people thinking differently about this, so that we don't get into this, oh, a politician said they're against central bank digital currencies, we have nothing to worry about. You have something to worry about right now.
Well, that's why I think we need to educate, again, just to bring it back, I think we need to educate people on all the different verbiage that they're trying to use for whatever they're going to try to call 1984 coin.
Yep. And I will say, just as one other thought, read the article. And if you have any other thoughts, I put this together. I put together this index. This is not set in stone. I wanted to put this out as a starting point so that we can control how we talk about these things, and not politicians and not people from the WEF and the Bank for International Settlements. That's really what I want to do, is I want us to come up with a common framework for us to evaluate the digital tyranny through money.
Awesome. Awesome, my friend. Well, I definitely look forward to Tuesday. We'll confirm the time. I'm going to go ahead and ride us out here at the stream. So, and then I want to grab some food, man. So feel free to go ahead and bounce. I do appreciate you joining us. Again, links will be down below for all of Aaron's socials, his channels, and everything that we talked about on today's show, man. I really do appreciate you taking the time to join, man.
Thank you. I had a great time and look forward to talking to you on Tuesday.
Have a good one, bro.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for tuning in. I greatly appreciate. One thing I do want to mention before we do wrap things up, let me get this screen shared. I've been having some information shared on the screen, but if you're here watching, we had over 100 people. Make sure you smash that like button wherever you're watching, because we're live streaming on my YouTube, my Rumble, my X account, on Aaron's YouTube and Aaron's Rumble. Links will be down below. Again, make sure you are subscribed, hit that notification bell. And with everything that's happening, with all the turmoil, I definitely encourage you to take advantage of my partnership with my Patriot Supply. Check out prepwithrice.com. And I'm trying to get down on the screen where I have that information and navigate while I'm doing this live stream. So you can see the information. You can save money on 1 month, 3 month backup food. Be smart, be prepared, not scared. This is a way to support the channel. Look out for yourself, for your family. And the good thing about stuff like this is you can always eat it regardless of what happens. But I think that the closer we get to the presidential election, the more you should be concerned about what's going on around you. So I encourage you to have some emergency food on hand. You can save $300 today on a 3-month emergency kit at prepwithrice.com. Prepwithrice.com. It supports the channel, and it's a way for you to look out for you and your family, your friends, your loved ones. There's also other deals, so be sure to check it out. I do appreciate you tuning in. Again, we are going to do that next live stream with Aaron next Tuesday. We will figure out the time specifically, but it'll be like probably 2, 3, or 4 o'clock. We'll be starting on this coming Tuesday. And again, we're going to be talking about solutions, talking about living without a bank, talking about privacy coins, alternative currencies. Thank you for tuning in for today's video. I greatly appreciate it. Again, if you have not smashed that like button, I would greatly appreciate it if you take an opportunity to do so. And I'm going to ride us out with this awesome song that Seth from Mind Your Biz created for the channel. I do apologize for having to cancel this past Wednesday's live stream. I'm still not feeling 100% great. I was sick, had a fever, throwing up. I wasn't feeling the best yesterday. Still not feeling the best today, but I felt better enough to be able to do this live stream. So thank you for joining me. Greatly appreciate. Time is our most valuable asset. I encourage you, as always, to be a blessing to others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be the glitch that you want to see in this matrix, the change that you want to see in this world. Question everything. Know yourself. And until next time, practice change.
RiceTVx, the mic's live wire. American Pitbull, real gold buyer. Sound money advocate, vice defender. In the crypto arena, he's the top contender. From the gritty streets of the digital age, Rice lays wisdom, chapter and page. Silver, gold, he stores only the bold. Land, life, and liberty, these values hold. Constitution, deep dive, knowledge revival. Navigate the system, critical for survival. Rice engraved like inscriptions on metal. Pitbull in the game, lead foot on the pedal. Land acquirer, a strategic mind. In the fight for freedom, he's frontline. Educate on rights, the law he'll explain. Chris Rice the Pitbull, breaking the chain.
It's coming. Calm
In the
down.
arena where truths collide. RiceTVx, the certified guide. Silver and gold, land and rights. American Pitbull in the freedom fights. In a world of chaos, he's the calm in the storm. Teaching the masses, ready to inform. Keys to crypto, rights we cherish. His wisdom like paths that others perish. Guardian of wealth, from digital to ancient. His legacy crafted, fearless and patient.
What's one move in bed that makes a man go crazy every time?
Oh,
that
you
do?
gotta give him that huck too and spit on that thing. You get me?